Get this show on the road. Today I'm going to talk to you all about how you can build newsletters in Quorum. I've been hearing a lot from folks now that we're pivoting to digital engagement and trying to communicate with our stakeholders and our advocates in new ways in our new work from home reality. A lot of them want to start building newsletters. And so I feel like there's going to be a lot of you on this call who are in the same place. Maybe you already have an established newsletter, or maybe you're just considering putting one together for the first time. So the question is, why would you want to create a newsletter? This is a great, frequent, reliable communication channel with your stakeholders and advocates, so you're always top of mind with them. Oftentimes, if folks are an advocate of yours, if they're taking action with what you do, or they've gone to your events, or they sign up for anything on the forum, chances are they're interested in what you have to say. And so creating a newsletter is a great way, one, to keep yourself responsible in putting out that information, but also just so you can end up creating that great relationship with your advocates and your stakeholders. This is an opportunity for engagement, highlighting your team's successes and sharing stories. One client that I was working with was talking about how they wanted to create a newsletter because there are so many things that happen day to day that you're just not going to send to folks in an email by itself. Like if you have a cool initiative that you did, or you got a story from one of your advocates that you thought was especially telling, and you don't really want to send that as an email by itself. But in a newsletter, you can put those things in so folks can still see it and absorb it and get something out of it for y'all. So I'm going to walk through a few tactics on how to build a great newsletter using Quorum, and then I'm going to go into Quorum and actually walk through the process. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A. So first, it's really important to pick the most important thing of your newsletter. So every time you send out your newsletter, you need to look through your content and decide, what is the one thing that I'm going to focus on? The average time people spend reading each email is only 13 seconds, which means that they're only reading about 54 words in an email. So let's think about what our emails, the first 54 words should be, so then you're able to capture their attention. And if they decide that they're done reading their email, they got something else to do, that they got something out of this newsletter from the beginning. So recommend that you pick your one thing. The way we do this at Quorum is I do this little blurb at the very beginning that says, hey, this is the one thing that I think that you should know. Just kind of summarizing the newsletter up at the top and then creating a link up in the top in order to make sure that if they're only going to read it for the first 14 seconds, that they get the most important information right away. Some other organizations use this by having a big picture at the beginning, or a really engaging infographic or something like that. But they pick their one thing and they really stress that. I will also try to make the subject line fit this one big thing as well. And just so you know, once we started doing this, our click rate rose about 50% per email. So this really, really worked for us. Additionally, we got to keep it simple. Oftentimes in newsletters, what you think about when you're starting to put it together is like a physical copy of a newsletter, like a magazine, and you start to draft up these long-worded emails. Like, for example, this one up here is from an email I saw from a government organization that walked through what the CARES Act means. And I thought this was like a great, oh, this actually wasn't, I edited the name out. You'll notice it says Tiffany Haddish. But I took this and I said, okay, if I was an advocate, what actually would I be interested in? And what would actually drive them to take action and learn more? And so the average email length is about 450 words. And like we said, only 54 of those words are likely going to be read. So my tip to you is to think of what is the one thing per each section. Try to get that in about 54 words, and then link to the source if people actually want to learn more. A couple of things to watch out for here is whenever you're writing this content is political speak or politician speak. For example, nobody refers to like their advocates as the American people. Like whenever you're talking with your family, your mom, they're never like, oh, the American people really believe XYZ. Usually they're like, people do XYZ, or my friends and neighbors or XYZ from work, they do XYZ. And so let's try to avoid sounding like a politician or like we're writing the Declaration of Independence in all of our emails. The next thing is unnecessary information. For example here, do we really need to know that the CARES Act was signed into law by the US Congress and signed by President Trump on this exact date? Probably not. So we just need to know that the CARES Act was passed, and what does that mean for you? Like we said, only 54 words. Let's try to keep it under that. Let's try to stay away from exclusive jargon. I know a lot of us as public affairs professionals will talk to other people on our team a lot, or the people that we surround ourselves with know a lot about politics, and they know a lot about the government affairs industry and grassroots advocacy. Chances are your advocates don't. And so try to think of this as you're writing a letter to someone who you've never met with, or you're trying to create an email for someone that you just met on the metro to talk about your specific issues. How would I get them to actually care about what we're talking about? Of course, avoiding run-on and passive sentences, and then adding too many adverbs. So these are some of the tools that I use to help me cut down my writing and make it really effective. I use writer.zoho.com, which will say like, hey, Patrick, you use some exclusive jargon. One great thing that this also does is that if you're using exclusive language when it comes to gender and race, it'll flag that for you as well, just to make sure that your content is equally applicable for everyone. And then the Hemingway app is very similar, and Grammarly always checks my grammar, because for some reason I still make those kind of mistakes. And then lastly, think about where your links go. So if you're linking to something, make sure that that link isn't just like a dead end, that it's not, you're linking to something where they might read it and then that's it. Make sure that wherever you're linking it, people can take another step. Like maybe they're, for example, we see a lot of our clients put more information in a campaign. So when you say learn more, you can come in here and then you can read learn more. And right next to it, you see a place for your advocates to take action, so then they can do something else. Another thing I see folks doing is if you do want to link to something that's on your organization's website or webpage, maybe you can embed your campaign at the bottom of that webpage so folks can take action right after they read about it. It's just another way for us to get more out of our advocates and keep them engaged. There's a lot of opportunities that we have through newsletters, and let's make sure that we're fully taking advantage of it. All right, with all that said, now I'm gonna run into how you can create a newsletter in Quorum. So first, we're gonna go over to Outbox. This is where you can send all your plain text messages and all your HTML messages as well. And we're gonna go up to the top and say plus new email. And now it's gonna default as a simple email typically, but we can just move the little toggle over to the advanced email tool. All right, Quorum's taking its time. So the first step is choosing your recipients. Oftentimes you already have your contacts ready to go in a list, but try to think about who this specific newsletter is aimed at. Then you can use your filters on the left-hand side to refine your recipients. So maybe this is a newsletter that's just for community members, or maybe it's a newsletter that's just for business owners. And so we can select them here and then go down to the bottom and say submit all. And it's going to ask you to title your selection. And this is just for you to know. They don't know that they're in the selection called business owners. That's just for your reference. All right, so now that you have your contacts set, we're going to go over to the advanced email tool. We're going to click in the designer to get going. So the functionality here is really simple once you learn how to do it. It's drag and drop from the right-hand side. So if we want an image right at the top, we can just pull in an image, and then you can select what image you want here. If you want to delete a row or delete content, you can click on the row and then hit delete. So one thing I recommend you do whenever you're first starting your newsletter is to put in the rows and then put in the information afterwards. So for example, if at the top we're just going to have our logo, and then we're going to have another image or some text, and then we're going to have, some more text underneath that, I'm just going to start pulling in these different rows. Then maybe you want someone's image to the left of some text. So we'll select one of these and pull it in there that way. So now you can kind of see the wireframe of what this email is going to look like. Now the next step is pulling in your content. So I'm going to pull in an image to put it right up at the top. Maybe I want my company's logo to be up at the top. So now I'm going to select Browse and go to our company's logo. If you don't have this in Outbox already, you can go up to the top where it says Upload and then pull in your image. Great, and there you go. Now your logo is in Quorum. Maybe you want to make it a little bit smaller so it's not taking up the full width. What we can do is on the right-hand side under Content Properties, this is where we can edit our image. So right now it's at auto width, and I want to take that off. And I want to just make it a little bit smaller here so it's not all the way across the screen. So I can just shrink that down there. Great. Now, right under that, I'm going to pull in some text. So this is where I can put in the header of my newsletter. Maybe we just want to call this What's New with Association of Goods and Services. Okay, so to edit your text, edit the color, the size, the font, we can highlight it and then we can choose just like you would in Word, very similar. So I'm going to make my header really big, make it like 28, or maybe even larger, make it 34. And I'm going to center it right here. Great, and maybe you want to recolor it. So here you can put in your custom colors, or you can choose one of the ones that we have selected. Recommend that you connect with your marketing or communications team to make sure that all your colors match up and all that stuff. Great, and maybe now we want to pull in a picture. And let's use this take action, for example. Great, so now we can see how this is starting to come together, right? Where we have our information tucked into these different rows. And then maybe we want to pull in another row in between these two for some text. So we can pull in text again, and then say, hi, this is really important. And this is the one big thing. Perfect. One great way that you can personalize this message is to use our placeholders. So our placeholders pull in the information from your contacts in order to personalize this message with whatever information that we have on their contact profile. For example, when I say insert placeholder, we can pull in their first name, their last name. We can pull in their organization if we have it. We can also do their state senator or pull in that information. So if we can say, you should call this person to let them know what you think about the issue. If we have their address, then we can do all the work for you to figure out who that person is. All right, so for now, I'm just going to say recipient's first name. And it's copied. And we'll pull it in just like that. One thing I recommend whenever you're creating your newsletter, or really any email in Quorum, is that you bump up the size of the text. So instead of being a default 14, maybe we want to make it 16 or 17. The rule of thumb that I always like to use is send it to your phone, okay? And then whenever you send the test email to yourself, hold your phone all the way out and tilt it a little bit. And if you have to squint to read it, chances are folks who have a hard time reading aren't going to be able to read it, or it's just like not going to be such a pleasant experience. So I recommend that you try that tip to see if your text is large enough. Another thing you can do is increase the line height on the right-hand side. Perfect. So now we can go ahead and add, maybe oftentimes in newsletters, we want to separate some content, so we can pull in a divider down below. And then we can start off with a new section down below here. A couple other things I want to run through really quick is if we go over to settings on the right-hand side, this is where we can edit some of the design settings for the whole email. For example, maybe we want to increase the content area width. Right now it's at 500 pixels. The standard for most marketing emails is about 600. So maybe we want to pull that up to 600. Additionally, if you're creating an email or a newsletter and you want to put in some kind of infographic and you're like really stressing to read the infographic, maybe it makes sense for you to increase the content area size so it's really easy to see whatever graphic that you're putting in there. All right. And then the other thing I'd just like to point out is the difference between background color and then content area background color. The only way I can really show this off well is if I change them a little bit. So I'm going to change the background color to be this gray. And then I'm going to take the content area background color and I'm going to make it white. I like doing this because I think it makes my content really stand out. So it really pops off the screen whenever you're looking at it here. Additionally, you can take out the background color if you click on the row and then say content area background color, and we're going to make it transparent. This is what I do for the Quorum Caucus. Is you'll see our logo up at the top, and then all the other information is in white below. Great. And then the last thing I'm going to point out about how you put these different emails together is buttons. And buttons are a great way to really drive people to take action because it's really clear of what the call to action is. So I'm going to pull in another row. I'm going to put it right here. Maybe I want to move my line underneath it or just get rid of my little line for now. So I'm going to pull in my button. And here we can change the text. So we can change the text to take action. And like I mentioned, whenever you're driving folks to your action center, it's a great idea to use what we call magic links so folks don't have to re-enter their information again in order to take action. That way they're able to just click the button, they're immediately logged into your organization's action center, and then you can get them going in just a couple of minutes. So I'm going to say insert placeholder and scroll on down to grassroots links for contacts. And here we can decide what link we want to do. So let's use this, tell members of Congress to step up to the plate. So we clicked the campaign we want to use, hit OK. And all the way over here on the right-hand side where it says link type, we can post in our URL. And so whenever folks go ahead and they click this button, then it'll go right to the action center so they can just hit take action and they'll send their message. You can edit your button by clicking in it and then deciding on the size of the text here. And on the right-hand side, we can also choose the background color for this as well. So maybe you want this blue instead. Lastly, if your communications team comes back to you and says, "Oh, actually, we do a different kind of button," you can change more settings on your buttons here by maybe we want to make the button a little bit more like a circle. So we'll increase the border radius, or maybe we want to increase the padding so it's kind of long and the message is just in the middle. We can do that here on the sides. There you go. Now you got a beautiful custom button. All right. So that's just about everything that I wanted to run through in creating these different emails. Feel free to post your questions at the bottom in order to for me to ask them. In the meantime, I'm going to go walk through some ways that you can look at how your email did and see which advocates are opening and engaging with this email. So I'm going to go ahead and hit finish. Let's pretend that I sent it, and I'm going to go back to Outbox. And what this will always show you is all the emails that you and your team have sent. For example, we'll see in this help AMP capitalize on this moment, we'll see it was sent to one person, and you can see what stats would be available here if we actually did send it. I feel people would be really quizzical if they saw something from a fake organization. Like, I don't know what AMP is. So here you can see the number of opened, the percent clicks, and so on and so forth. But if you click directly into the email here, and then we go over to the recipients tab, here we can see exactly who we sent this email to and whether or not they opened and clicked it. You can also, you can also go directly to the links to see what links were clicked on the most often. Usually this is a great way in your newsletter to decide and find out, okay, what content is my audience really interested in knowing about? So if you put in, maybe there's a site opening and you put that in versus a webinar versus like a case study about a member organization, here you can see what content they actually like engaging with the most often. And then once you've created your beautiful email, you can save it as a template. So then you don't have to recreate the wheel every time you go in and create a newsletter. All right, I'm gonna hop over into Q&A to see what y'all have to say. First question from Lauren, will we get the slide deck? You sure will get the slide deck. And all of our presentations from the Quorum Summit will be available to watch on demand. What do I mean by too many adverbs? So oftentimes we use adverbs adverbs describe a verb, an adjective, or a noun. So say like, he ran quickly. Oftentimes it's not super needed. There's not all that necessary to add that. Usually you pull in adverbs whenever the thing that you're describing you're describing it kind of weak. For example, when you say, I held the bat tightly, tightly is the adverb, but you could say, I gripped the bat to give a better example there. So the rule of thumb that people usually give is in about 300 or 400 words, you can have one adverb. Sometimes they're kind of necessary to get the point across. All right. Can we send the email to people within your organization or just government officials in Quorum? That's a great question. So using our stakeholder tool, you can email any of your stakeholders and your contacts that exist outside of the preloaded Quorum data sets in Quorum Federal and State. So if you have Quorum stakeholder, you absolutely can email folks on your team and other members, stakeholders, and advocates. One thing I do recommend, though, is that you whitelist Quorum's IP, and you can reach out to your customer success manager to make sure that that's happened for you and your team. All right, going to go over to chat. How do you send a preview or test version to someone? Great question. Let me walk through it. So I'm going to go actually to this latest email that I was putting together. So once you've been designing your email, here we can go down below and say send test email. And this will auto-populate with whatever email that you're using Quorum with. But you can go ahead and plug in other emails here. This is a good tip that I've heard from a couple of my clients is that they'll put in their work email address and then email addresses associated with different email platforms. What I mean by that is my email address uses Gmail and I open it up using the Gmail app, but my personal email address, I use the preloaded app on iPhones. And so I'm able to see, okay, how does this look on Gmail versus how does this look on the preloaded app on all of our iPhones. So that's how you send a preview test version. Another thing that you can utilize whenever you're putting together this email is this preview button right here at the top. And this will show you what your message looks like on desktop versus mobile. All right, let's see if we have any more questions. This has been great so far. For emails to Capitol Hill, what's a good open rate, click rates, and what are the averages? So we haven't done a lot of like aggregate analysis on this, but what I know from experience is that whenever you're blasting the Hill, typically somewhere between 15 and 20% is really good. The thing though that I recommend, and if you're gonna email Capitol Hill, is make sure that your audience is very well defined. What I mean is that if your organization works on a specific issue, maybe using the information that Peter just talked about in the stakeholder mapping webinar is that you only email staffers who work for officials that are tied to that issue. Or maybe you email the folks who are tagged to that issue in the Quorum platform. So maybe I work on an issue around foreign policy. Maybe I'll just find foreign policy staffers and then just email those folks. A lot of people on the Hill get hundreds of messages a day, and you want to be known as a reliable source of information, not just somebody who spams the Hill. And so I recommend that if you go ahead that angle, which oftentimes it's fantastic to do so, to message the Hill, make sure that you're selective in your audience that way. All right. Looks like we are out of questions. Like I said, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me at patrick@quorum.us, and I'm happy to help walk you through creating your own newsletter or just provide some tips and tricks along the way. You can also reach out to your customer success manager or our wonderful support team at support@quorum.us. Awesome. This has been wonderful. Looking forward to seeing y'all at the rest of Quorum Summit sessions.